Hello and welcome, and thanks for joining us. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for tonight. Glitter, glam, laughter, clinking glasses, hashtags of goodbye 2023. In the last 24 hours, this is all you would have seen. The sound of joy, of celebration, of making merry. You have seen bright lights shine in prosperous areas, welcoming another day in the annual calendar. You would have heard the cacophony of fireworks and confused it with joy to the world. But let me remind you that as the firecrackers light up your night sky, another sky is lit with rocket fire. As you pop that bottle of bubbly, there is no water to drink in a war-ravaged part of the world. As you tuck your kids into bed, wishing them the best year ahead, guns and drones are being showered upon children elsewhere. I don't want to say Happy New Year tonight, because behind that curtain of glitter is a bleak saga. A saga of grief and senseless loss. I don't want to wish you Happy New Year tonight because I'd rather ask, what do you, the viewer, want in this new year? Some would say they want more money. Some would make resolutions of being fitter. Some would want lower prices. Many would say they want happiness. What about peace? Then again, it's futile asking what you want, because we all only get what politicians want. We get war, we get inflation, we get anxiety, and more than anything else, we get brutality and the death of children. We see visuals of children dying, we feel emotions that are too much to bear. I'll tell you what I want. I'm a mom of 2 young children. Like any other parent, I want my children to be safe. I want my children to get education, to go to parks, feel safe and happy. This is a universal feeling. It is a right of every parent. But parents are being denied their most basic rights. And this is because our world is at war. So no, tonight I will not be saying Happy New Year, because the new year comes with some grave questions. Will there be a full-scale war in West Asia? Will Xi Jinping's dream of unifying Taiwan with China mean conflict in South China Sea? Will Northeast Asia explode? Pakistan, it seems it has never been at peace. In 2024, will the war within Pakistan escalate? Will an oil war break out in South America? What about Africa? What happens there? So tonight on Gravitas, I have no glitter to show you. What I have is the harsh reality of this new year. This is the story of brutal war and dubious peace. Let's jump straight to the first question. Will there be a full-scale war in West Asia in 2024? It is just day one of the new year, and the signs are pointing at something dangerous. Iran's warship has entered the Red Sea. We are looking at the possibility of the US and the UK joining the war in West Asia. I will start by telling you what happened over the weekend. The Houthi fighters came face to face with the US forces. It happened in the Red Sea. On Sunday, Houthi fighters attacked a Singapore-flagged commercial vessel. The Houthis were trying to board this ship. The security on board the vessel was trying to fight the Houthis. And that's when the US forces patrolling the Red Sea arrived on scene. These were helicopters from the USS Eisenhower carrier group. The Houthi fighters reportedly opened fire at the choppers. The American troops retaliated. The U.S. Central Command claims, and I quote, "The U.S. Navy helicopters returned fire in self-defense, sinking 3 of the 4 small boats and killing the crews. The 4th boat fled the area. There was no damage to U.S. personnel or equipment." What about the Houthis? The Yemen-based group put out a statement. It said 10 of their fighters had died in the incident. Allow me to quote again. "The American enemy bears the consequences of this crime. Its military movements in the Red Sea to protect Israeli ships won't prevent the Houthis from performing their religious, moral and humanitarian duty to support and aid of those who have been wronged in Palestine and Gaza." The war in Gaza has spilled into the Red Sea. And this is the new flashpoint, perhaps the most dangerous one this new year. What happened on Sunday was the first direct firefight between the US troops and the Houthis. So where do things go from here? Towards something more dangerous. Reports say Allied forces are preparing for an attack on the Houthis. The British and American troops are working on a plan. At least one more European country could be joining in. The British Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, shared some details in his article in The Telegraph. He said, and I quote, "The Houthis should be under no misunderstanding. We are committed to holding malign actors accountable for unlawful seizures and attacks." Reports say the UK and the US are expected to issue a verbal final warning to the Houthis. The statement obviously will ask for the Houthis to stand down in the Red Sea. And this could come any time now. Chances are the attacks won't stop. Houthis have vowed to continue fighting alongside Hamas. So what's part 2 of the plan? Reports say the UK may send a warship, the HMS Lancaster, to the Gulf region. This warship is equipped with the Sea Scepter missile system. It can fire 3 times the speed of sound, and it is designed to protect an area of more than 800 square kilometers. The Sea Scepter can also attack fast-moving boats, you know, the kind that the Houthi fighters are using. British media is reporting that the HMS Lancaster has been on standby to assist another British warship, the HMS Diamond, in the Red Sea. Previously, the HMS Diamond did manage to shoot down a Houthi drone, but things seem to be getting out of hand now. What happened this Sunday was the 23rd instance of a Houthi attack on international ships in the Red Sea. The United States is losing its patience. The US is already leading a multinational naval task force in the Red Sea. We told you about it. I'm referring to Operation Prosperity Guardian. At least 20 countries are part of this force. Clearly, this alliance has not deterred the Houthis. So in the Pentagon, many top officials believe that a stronger military message must be sent to the Houthis. What kind of message? We are told there is a detailed plan in place. It involves striking missile and drone bases in Yemen. Also, facilities that house the small boats that Houthis are using for the Red Sea attacks. Senior and retired Pentagon officials want to re-establish American deterrence. They are citing the year 2016 and what happened then. That year, the Houthis fired on US Navy and commercial ships in the Red Sea. The US retaliated, struck 3 Houthi missile sites. The Houthis stopped attacking, but you know what? Things are different in 2024. An American attack or an Allied attack will be an escalation, not a deterrence. And there is bound to be retaliation. This concept of strike for a strike will leave West Asia burning. Who do you think supports the Houthis? Iran. What happens when Allied troops hit the Houthis? What happens when a salvo of Western missiles falls on Yemen? Will Iran sit back and watch? Iran's warship has already entered the Red Sea. My point here is clear. It is the 1st of January 2024 and you are staring at a full-blown war in West Asia. A war which will be fought on land, at sea, and will engulf global shipping. Here's why you should care more. India has a commercial and security stake in the Red Sea. So what will this war mean for India? India has one of the world's strongest navies. The recent global naval powers ranking puts Indian Navy 7th from top. In fact, recently, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh vowed to avenge the attacks on India-linked vessel. I'm talking about the MV Kem Pluto and the MV Sai Baba. Rajnath Singh also emphasized India's position as a security provider. The spokesperson of India's External Affairs Ministry, Arindam Bakshi, added that India is monitoring the developments in the Red Sea. Now, India will also be keeping a close eye on the Indian Ocean and what happens in the South China Sea. Taiwan goes to the polls on the 13th of January. That's just 12 days from now, and these 12 days are extremely crucial. China is betting big on this election. What happens if the result does not make Xi Jinping happy? Will the Chinese president's dream of unifying Taiwan with China mean conflict in South China Sea? Beijing has been preparing to take over Taiwan by force for a while now. Xi recently sounded a warning to Taiwan. It came in the form of a New Year message. Xi Jinping said reunification with Taiwan was a historical inevitability. He added that compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait must share in the glory of national rejuvenation. Another New Year speech was delivered in Taiwan by the outgoing president Tsai Ing-wen. She said the cross-strait relations should be decided by the will of the Taiwanese people. Xi Jinping does not agree. He believes in history, in one China, not democracy. Tsai Ing-wen's government has repeatedly warned that Beijing is trying to interfere in the election. And let me remind you, it helps China if the KMT or the Kuomintang party wins this election. The party is pro-Beijing. Meanwhile, Tsai's DPP or the Democratic Progress Party insists on a sovereign Taiwan. And polls say come 13th of January, it will be a neck-and-neck fight. I ask once again, what happens if the results don't make China happy? Analysts are predicting a serious conflict in the South China Sea. So will Xi Jinping's dream of one China be the trigger? And if that's the case, will the war in South China Sea be fought by just Taiwan and China? There are other disputes too. They have created several flashpoints in these dangerous waters. For example, the Second Thomas Shoal and the Scarborough Shoal. Philippines and China have been facing off here. The Philippines has accused China of firing water cannons at its ships, firing laser at its vessel, also ramming into its ships. China does not deny this aggression. Instead, Beijing refers to them as legitimate controlled measures to protect its so-called territory. You see, China claims more than 80% of the South China Sea. This water, Beijing claims, was historically Chinese. For the longest time, China used the 9-dash line to demarcate this territory. In 2023, China introduced an additional 10th dash. Beijing has for long been preparing for a war here, all the while embracing in grey zone in the hope to make quiet but substantial gains. And that's actually worked well for China. It has also militarized 3 Spratly Islands, created 7 military outposts in the area. And China is not the only one preparing for a conflict in these waters. After Ferdinand Marcos Jr. won the presidential election in the Philippines, he expanded the US military footprint in his country. This was under EDCA, or the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. It authorizes the United States to station forces across 9 locations in the Philippines. Some of these sites are near the Spratly Islands. Some of these sites face Taiwan. The Philippines believes if and when China invades Taiwan, Manila will most likely get involved. These face-offs with China at sea have added to this conviction. What they have also done is push Manila closer to Washington. You see, a war in the South China Sea will not be limited to just 2 parties. The US, and in particular its President Joe Biden, have repeatedly vowed to go to war if China invades Taiwan. Japan has started rearming itself in the meantime. It is preparing to be dragged into this war. Vietnam and China had a recent standoff over oil drilling in 2023. Brunei and Malaysia are also engaged in disputes with China in the South China Sea. Up to 30% of sea trade passes through the South China Sea. Analysts believe these waters are one flare-up away from a full-blown war. On to the next big geopolitical question. Will there be a conflict between the Koreas in 2024? Will North and South Korea go to war once again? This question crops up courtesy a recent remark by Kim Jong-un. On Sunday, Kim addressed a key party meeting to set state goals for next year. During his address, the North Korean leader declared that he will no longer seek reconciliation and reunification with the South. Allow me to quote his exact remarks. It's time for us to acknowledge the reality and clarify our relationship with the South. I believe that it is a mistake that we must no longer deal with the people who declare us as the main enemy and seek only opportunities for our regime's collapse and unification by absorption, by collaborating for reconciliation and unification. That's not all. Kim added that the policy goals for his government in 2024 include the launching of 3 military spy satellites, producing more nuclear materials, and building modern attack drones to advance North Korea's military goals. He says, our army should deal a deadly blow to thoroughly annihilate the enemy by mobilizing all the toughest means and potentialities without moment's hesitation if they opt for military confrontation and provocation against North Korea. So how do we view these warnings from Kim? Is he actually preparing for war? And if yes, what does South Korea have to say? I'll answer these questions one at a time. To start with, some experts say that boosting nuclear capability would give Kim another big chance to launch a diplomacy summit with the United States. He could use the nuclear capabilities as a bargaining chip and extract concessions from the White House, especially if Donald Trump ends up winning the US presidential race. Long story short, ramping up production of weapons could become a negotiating card for Kim in diplomatic talks with the United States. Now, that's one assessment. The other assessment is that this is purely a step in self-defense. You see, during his speech, Kim also cited the expansion of US military exercises with South Korea. He's worried. And the temporary deployment of powerful US military assets like bombers and a nuclear-armed submarine in South Korea. North Korea views these developments as a threat to its very existence. Perhaps this is why it wants to, quote-unquote, annihilate its enemy. Now, here's the thing. North and South Korea have been cut off from each other since the end of the Korean War. The war ended in 1953 with an armistice. Since then, the two sides have still been technically at war, but both governments have long sought the goal of reunifying one day. If we speak of bilateral relations, they have ebbed and flowed over the decades, but tensions have remained high in recent years, after Kim Jong-un ramped up the country's nuclear weapons program in defiance of international sanctions. So in 2024, expect more of the same, more threats, more tests, more tensions. What about war? Well, so far the possibility remains bleak. There could be a temporary round of tensions, but we don't see it spiraling into a full-blown war. But then again, it's just the 1st of January. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, is the likelihood of two sides going to war has increased now more than ever. Here's a question that might buzz all year round in 2024, a question which concerns the Russia-Ukraine war. Has this war become a forever war, a war with no end in sight? I ask this question because it's been 674 days since the war started. 674 days of fighting, death, and destruction. Yet, neither side is willing to relent. Neither side is willing to talk peace. So will 2024 be more of the same? It surely looks like it. To start with, it's been 1 year and 10 months, and no side has made any significant gain. Ukraine's ground offensive remains stagnant. Russian forces also haven't made any major advances. Are they caught in a quagmire of sorts? Well, NATO officials say that was always the plan. They had hoped from the start of the war to trap Russia in an Afghanistan-like blunder, where its forces are unable to move beyond a certain point and eventually start retreating. But this is not Afghanistan. This is a former Soviet republic, a place Russia once controlled, a place it operated out of, which is why a Russian retreat is out of the equation. On the flip side, trying to get Russia caught in a quagmire and prolonging the war is only hurting Ukraine further. It has already suffered breathtakingly vast human and economic costs. And it continues to fall further and further into the debt every month. What's worse, a prolonged war is not going to be good for the rest of Europe either. It will only feed into the cost of living shocks. And as the war drags further this year, it will also become a sore political issue in the 2024 US election. You see, Joe Biden came to office with the promise of ending forever wars and launching an era of relentless diplomacy. This clearly hasn't happened. Forget ending the war in Ukraine, the US has ended up making this war a political liability. Lawmakers in the US Congress are pushing for an end to military aid for Ukraine. And back on the battleground, Russia is threatening to increase strikes on Ukraine. Just 24 hours back, it fired a fresh barrage of strikes on New Year's Eve. Reports say more than 100 Shahed munitions were fired against cities all over the country. Immediately after these strikes, the Russian president issued a statement vowing to increase strikes on targets which he said Russia had not been hitting. With these warnings, Putin has made his intention clear that Russia will not retreat from the battleground, even if it's years or decades for that matter. In other words, the Kremlin seeks nothing less than Kyiv's total capitulation. And this has cast a spotlight on the future of Russia itself, with questions swirling about its intentions. Will it ever settle in its borders? Will it expand the war beyond Ukraine? Will it try to restore its Cold War-era empire? Well, there are indeed fears that Russia's ambitions may not stop at Ukraine. Experts say unless Russian forces are defeated in Ukraine or they withdraw, Moscow might assault other post-Soviet neighbors. And if and when it does this, the West may face limits on the extent to which it could help them thwart such attacks. As it is, support for Ukraine is waning in America and its Western allies. In the face of heightened Russian aggression and Russian troops reaching newer borders, there's no saying to what extent America and the NATO will be willing to go. Next question. Will Pakistan finally see peace in 2024? Will it finally see an end to terrorism, political violence, economic turmoil, and the many challenges plaguing it? I ask these questions because 2023 has been exceptionally chaotic for Pakistan. Last year, Pakistan witnessed the highest number of suicide attacks since 2014. What's worse, nearly half of these attacks targeted security forces. Look at these numbers. Pakistan witnessed a total of 29 suicide attacks last year. These attacks claimed more than 329 lives. They left more than 582 individuals injured. What's more striking is the fact that 48% of these deaths were inflicted on security forces personnel. So over 58% of injuries. In other words, Pakistan's security forces were the biggest victims of these suicide attacks. Now, these were suicide attacks. If we speak of overall attacks, Pakistan witnessed a 6-year high in violence-related fatalities. According to the Islamabad-based Center for Research and Security Studies, there were at least 1,524 violence-related casualties, more than 1,400 injuries, and 789 terror attacks. These attacks reveal an alarming surge of 56% in violence, which in itself is an unprecedented escalation in the last decade. Now, besides terror, the country is also facing a concoction of miseries, a series of overlapping crises, societal, political, economical, and constitutional. If we speak of the economy, it's in the ICU. Food prices are astronomically high. The currency is in free fall. Forex reserves have depleted. The national debt has never been higher. If I speak of politics, Pakistan's ties with its neighbors are falling apart, be it Afghanistan or Iran. If we speak of Iran, in 2023, the multi-billion-dollar gas pipeline project between Pakistan and Iran was halted. Islamabad issued a notice to Iran formally suspending its contractual obligations. In return, Iran asked Pakistan to pay an $18 billion penalty for halting the project. If we speak of Afghanistan, reports say Taliban fighters are joining the Tehreek-e-Taliban in huge numbers. The TTP is a terror outfit which seeks to enforce the Sharia in Pakistan. It seems it now has the Taliban's blessings for its operations. The Taliban is also keeping the border consistently tense. Throughout 2023, there were skirmishes, clashes at the Torkham border checkpoint. Taliban and Pakistani forces exchanged fire, leading to the border crossing getting shut. This happened at least 5 times last year. So clearly, it's not just India, but a host of other nations that are slowly becoming fed up with Pakistan, that are slowly but certainly drifting apart from the country, as internally, the country slowly descends into many civil wars, a war between its politicians, a war between the politicians and the army, a war between terrorists and the incumbent government, and God forbid, a war between its own people. Here's hoping that in 2024, the leaders of Pakistan and the Pakistan army reflect and introspect. Here's hoping that they learn from their own mistakes of the past, and try to set things right for the sake of the country's future. Although we doubt if they're even capable of doing so, because even common sense is a rarity in today's Pakistan. Meanwhile, Venezuela and Guyana are locked in a territorial dispute. What do they want? The Essequibo region, an oil-rich border region in Guyana. Venezuela is claiming it as its own. Guyana doesn't agree, and it has the UK's blessing. Caracas isn't taking it so well. The tensions are simmering. Is South America headed for an oil war? Let's start from the top. Decades ago, Venezuela claimed Essequibo River formed a natural border. But it changed in 1814 when the UK acquired Guyana. The boundaries were undefined when the UK commissioned a surveyor to drop the border. Now, 30,000 square miles were added to Guyana. Venezuela disputed the same, but the UK didn't stop. It ended up taking 33,000 square miles to the west. The issue was never resolved. Fast forward to 2015, oil was found in the Essequibo region. How much? At least 11 billion barrels of recoverable oil and gas. This was enough to renew Venezuela's claims and interest. The United Kingdom has jumped in to support its former colony. It has sent its Royal Navy patrol vessel, the HMS Trent, to be deployed in Guyana. The Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, is not happy. He has slammed it as a hostile act of provocation. In response, he has ordered more than 5,600 troops to launch a defensive exercise near the Guyana border. This comes despite an agreement to contain tensions. Last month, Venezuela and Guyana signed an agreement to avoid using force and continue dialogue in its dispute over Essequibo. But Maduro seems to be taking an aggressive stand. He has asked Venezuelan oil companies to issue extraction licenses in the region. He has also given Guyanese companies working in the region an ultimatum to leave within 3 months. In December, Maduro's regime held a referendum seeking public support. The government asked its people whether they believe that Essequibo belongs to Venezuela. And according to the country's electoral body, 10.5 million ballots were cast. 95% of them said yes. The Guyanese president, Irfan Ali, called the referendum a direct threat. Guyana wants the dispute resolved through the International Court of Justice in The Hague. But Venezuela doesn't recognize its jurisdiction over the row. So how is this dispute going to end? Are the two neighbors headed towards an oil war? Now let's plot all these war zones on a map. West Asia, Ukraine, Russia, the Koreas, South China Sea, South America, the United States, the United Kingdom. And as you can see, you have Asia surrounded by war. You have a world engulfed in potential wars. This is the reality of 2024, brutal war and dubious peace. And how can we forget what's happening in Africa's Sahel region? It has long been plagued by jihadist violence. For years now, jihadist groups have wreaked havoc in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali for taking advantage of unstable governments. It remains to be seen what happens in this region in this year. I began the show by talking about what I want as a parent. I want my children to be safe and happy. It's the wish and the right of every parent. But when I look at what's happening in Gaza, I wonder, do we have the right to even hope anymore? Any war is a war against children. And children continue to be the silent victims of the two wars raging in our world. How did you and your children celebrate New Year's Eve? If you're in a safe corner of the world, the answer is predictable. Your evening would have ended with tucking in your children safely, wishing them good night, telling them to look forward to a new year. And this is Gaza. These are displaced Palestinians. They're trying to survive in a makeshift refugee camp. In the 12 weeks of war between Hamas and Israel, they have lost everything. The children are huddled around a fire. They have no reason to look forward to the new year. The other children from this family have been buried under rubble for more than 10 days.
We do not feel that there is a new year because of the intensity of the pain we live in. All days are the same. Our celebrations are not celebrations. When can we celebrate? When we check on our children who we left behind in the north, in Jabalia, and check on our people, about 80 people from the rest of our family who are still in the north. Then it will be a celebration.
Since the war began in Gaza, more than 5,300 children have reportedly been killed, nearly 9,000 injured. I mention Gaza for a reason, because 1 million young people under the age of 18 form nearly half the population in Gaza. There are few wars in history where children make up such a big portion of fatalities. You see, when that rocket falls, it knows no difference, no distinction between civilian and terrorist. Let's talk about Israel. Although Israel has not put a number on it, there were children and young adults among the 1,400 Israelis who were murdered by Hamas on October 7th. The visuals were heartbreaking. The sight of defenseless children peering through broken windows, playing around in rubble, bloodied and maimed, it's difficult to even speak of, let alone watch. But it's the brutal reality of today, one that we are quickly becoming desensitized to. It's not just Gaza. Children of war are everywhere. The violence in Ukraine, Yemen, Sudan, Myanmar, it has stripped children of their childhood, in some cases robbed them of a future. So who protects our children? Certainly not the UN Security Council. While the UN chief says security of civilians must be paramount, there is no clear updated resolution which protects the rights of children in this conflict. What we have is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It commands that children be protected in an armed conflict. But just look at what's happening in Gaza. Are children protected by any means? No. Here's what has happened. The same UN chief had to make a dire admission recently that the Gaza Strip was the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. So I ask you, each time you see a maimed child on the news, each time you reshare that image on social media, each time you watch a steady stream of murder of children, is global outrage enough? Is the world so polarized that it has failed its very future, the children? This global outrage is nowhere near enough. The children of Gaza are crying for help. It is not enough to just feel their pain. They need food, shelter, electricity, healthcare. The UN's humanitarian relief funds of some $17.9 billion as of September last year will need to be nearly tripled to meet the needs. This is what experts say. And this war is not likely to end anytime soon. Israeli strikes in central Gaza killed at least 35 people on Sunday when the world was celebrating. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war will continue for many more months. If and where this war is over, these children will need special care, grief counseling, because even if they survive the rockets and grenades, they'll have to live with the trauma for the rest of their life. So, For the parent in me, 2024 looks bleak because I shudder to think of the dystopian world that my children are growing up in. And as for the parents of the children of war, there is no new year. There is just the steady stream and the steady drumbeat of war, killing every hope of a new life. A migration problem is plaguing the world. This new year, more than 281 million people remain in immigration camps. And it's just a conservative number. The hungry, the deprived and the exploited are searching for better lives. In their quest, they have fueled a crisis. Immigration systems are overwhelmed globally. Latin America is bursting through into America. The US houses some 52 million illegal migrants. This is the highest in the world. The illegal migrants now account for 15% of the US population, and the number increases every year. More and more migrants cross the border. Last year alone, border agents arrested over 2 million such people. Earlier, the migrants used to be single adults from Mexico looking for a job. Now they come with their families. And not just from Mexico, from as far away as India, Uzbekistan, and Mauritania. The growing influx has spurred a political clash. You see, Republicans are accusing President Joe Biden of failing to police the borders. They are asking for tighter asylum policies. This issue has paralyzed Congress. Aid packages for Ukraine and Israel lie waiting for approval. The situation is equally grim in Europe. Africa is bursting through across the water into the continent. Germany, for instance, is home to 16 million illegal immigrants. The United Kingdom houses some 9 million. For the British government, stopping the boats has become a key political priority. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is pushing for his controversial Rwanda policy, through which he wants to deport migrants to Rwanda. Under his new Illegal Migration Act, even the number of refugees settling through safe and legal routes will be restricted. You see, the country is on guard. It has signed an agreement with France to train more patrol officers. It is also setting up a new detention center. In Asia, Afghans driven out by Pakistan are searching for a safe haven. Left with nowhere else to go, hundreds of thousands unwillingly cross the Torkham border to return to Afghanistan. They now reside in a barren desert in eastern Afghanistan. Some are lucky enough to live in tents. Others are forced to live out in the open. You see, Afghanistan has one of the world's most uprooted population. Some 6 million Afghans live as refugees in foreign countries. 3.5 million are internally displaced. That's what 40 years of war can do to a country. Afghanistan is already poor, but the displaced are poorest of the poor. Many live in camps, unable to afford food or firewood. Women and children often turn to begging. Others marry off their young daughters to families willing to pay them money. Many cross borders and move to Pakistan in search for stability, of stable homes. But now they have been expelled from there as well. And not so far away, there's another country where refugees long for a sense of home. I'm talking about Bangladesh. It houses around 1 million Rohingyas. Most of them arrived in 2017, fleeing persecution in Myanmar. Now they live in tightly packed temporary shelters made of bamboo and tarpaulin. Living conditions are far from ideal. Women and children are vulnerable to violence, exploitation and human trafficking. Meanwhile, in West Asia, many are trapped by the fire of war. The conflagration has become a wall that doesn't let them pass. And even if it does, where would these people go?
पूरी तरह से सेफली और सॉफ्टली चंद्रमा की सतह पे लैंड हो चुका है।
Now on to some good news. In 2024, India's space odyssey is also expected to reach new heights, courtesy the Indian Space Research Organisation, ISRO. It plans to unveil a compelling lineup of 12 groundbreaking missions. The aim of these missions vary, but they all promise to redefine our understanding of the Earth and the universe. To start with, India kicked off 2024 with a spectacular launch of the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. It unfolded earlier today. This vehicle carries the ExpoSat, India's first X-ray polarimeter satellite. What is the aim of this mission? Well, the ExpoSat is set to investigate the polarization of X-ray sources. So it will study 50 of the brightest known sources in the universe. This will help unravel the secrets of pulsars and black hole X-ray binaries. The next mission scheduled for January this year is the NASA-ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar, or NISAR. This is a groundbreaking collaboration between NASA and ISRO. Reports say the satellite aims to revolutionize remote sensing, given how it will map the globe every 12 days. The data it will gather will offer valuable insights into the Earth's many ecosystems. And next, we have the INSAT 3DS launch. This will also take place in January itself. For the unversed, this will be a crucial communication satellite within the Indian National Satellite System, or INSAT. Its primary mission will be to monitor weather systems and facilitate disaster management. Next, we have the Gaganyaan-1, a collaborative effort between ISRO and Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The mission is set to launch in either January or February this year. It will be a test flight with 3 crew members. The flight aims to lay the groundwork for future manned space exploration missions and positioning India as a key player in the field. Next, we have the Mangalyaan-2, also known as the Mars Orbiter Mission 2. This is ISRO's ambitious sequel to its successful Mars mission. The aim of the mission is to study the surface, atmosphere and climate conditions of Mars. This mission will be a testament to India's expanding prowess in planetary exploration. Also launching this year is the Shukrayaan-1. This is part of the Venus Orbiter mission. The spacecraft is expected to orbit Venus for 5 years. The ambitious mission is scheduled for December 2024 or 2025. The primary aim will be to study the atmosphere of Venus. This mission will mark India's first foray into exploring the mysteries of Venus. Now, these were just a few missions. Besides these, ISRO has several other ambitious projects on the horizon, like the RISAT-1B, the RESORSAT-3, the TDS-01, the SPADE-X, and the OceanSat-3A. All this makes for a very impressive lineup of missions, each posed to push the boundaries of India's space research capabilities. What's even more striking is the government's decision to open up the space sector, ushering in a new era of innovation and collaboration and partnerships between public and private entities. The new year has brought panic in Japan. A 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck the country. A tsunami warning was issued. High waves were reported in several areas. The visuals coming in from Japan are scary, to say the least. Take a look. A 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck Japan on the 1st of January 2024. The epicenter was in the country's Noto region. The tremors sparked fires. Buildings collapsed. Trains shook violently. This footage captures the exact moment the earthquake hit. In Nagano, you can see the quake jolting snow from buildings.
Wow.
You have items inside a convenience store shaking. This is a subway station in the Ishikawa prefecture. There were at least 21 aftershocks. A tsunami alert was issued across the coast of Japan. This eyewitness video shows the moment high waves hit Japan. The quake's effects were felt beyond Japan's borders. South Korea's Met Agency warned of possible tsunami waves hitting its eastern coast. While Russia issued tsunami warnings in the far eastern port cities of Vladivostok and Nakhodka, Japan has historically been prone to earthquakes. The country sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. It is one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. When we talk about peace, we talk of peace after war. But tonight, I also want you to think about being at peace with nature. Look around you. Global warming is a reality we cannot ignore. As we begin a new year, in our next report, we bring you stories from 3 different corners of the world. My hope is that it will serve as a wake-up call.
Our journey begins in California, where the ocean is unleashing its fury. Massive waves, some as high as 20 feet, are crashing along the coast. This is not a natural phenomenon. This is an indicator of a deeper disturbance. As we speak, coastal areas are on high alert for flooding, and damage to infrastructure is mounting. Beaches eroded, people injured, rescue work underway. The National Weather Service warns of life-threatening conditions, a direct consequence of powerful cyclones over the northern Pacific. But this story is not just about the ocean's wrath. It's about a global pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore. Let's shift our focus to India. This is Delhi NCR. Here, the winter that once brought chills is now essentially missing. Experts are linking this to global warming. Meteorologists say the average temperatures in Delhi during the winter have been steadily rising. The typical chilly days marked by dense fog and a biting cold are becoming rare. The number of cold wave days has dropped significantly. In other words, the famous Delhi winter is a thing of the past. Experts say that get ready for near non-existent winters and short springs in the future. And then there is New Zealand, a country famous for its natural beauty. Here, the government is taking drastic measures to combat a rat infestation that threatens their precious native birds. The rats, flourishing due to extreme weather conditions, are a glaring example of how climate change impacts biodiversity. Experts say if the world continues on its current path, the Earth's temperature will rise by 2 to 5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. At that rate, rats will be reproducing all year round. The rat crisis is not limited to New Zealand. Many countries are facing a rat scourge. The bottom line is this. Each of these stories, from California's raging waves, India's shrinking winter months, to New Zealand's battle with rats, are signs of a dangerous trend. What binds these stories together is the need for being at peace with nature. Ask yourself, what are you doing to restore balance? World leaders, policymakers, and each one of us has a role to play. The time for debate is over. Its time for action was yesterday. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
And that's a wrap on the show for tonight. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma. I'll see you tomorrow.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa,